Welcome to Dream Project 2. So, for this project, you're going to need to find three businesses similar to yours. And of course, there's going to be differences, but you want to find businesses that you respect, that are established, and have some evidence of success. And it might be helpful for you to choose one competitor who represents like your ideal future of what you want your business to be. Maybe they're 10 plus years ahead of you, and another business that's maybe 5 plus years ahead of you, and maybe one that's just a couple of years ahead of where you're at now. And that's going to give you some perspective of where you'd like to be in the future and how you can start small and simple now. So, also, possibly, you know of a brand who's in an adjacent industry to yours, but maybe you really love their brand design or their website is super sharp and it's not the exact same industry, but you know you want to borrow ideas from them. That could be helpful too. But with each of these, you want to investigate what are they doing well, what ideas can you borrow, as well as what could they be doing better, or rather, what will you be doing better or even differently? And in these competitive analyses, we're going to look at how they run their business, their revenue streams, their website, and their marketing strategies. And we're going to look at what their best sellers are, how they're offering them, how it's packaged, how it's marketed, how they network, how they collaborate, and how they scale. We're also going to focus on what you want to do differently because that's going to throw some headlights on the road ahead of you. And the reason that we're doing this is to give you the advantage to learn from someone who's already fucked up and made mistakes and made some improvements to reach the success that they're currently sustaining. So be intentional about who you're learning from. And maybe you have a few in mind, or maybe you need to do a little research and find some similar businesses who already have it dialed in. And I'm just going to take a moment to share with you the story of one of my previous clients and how extraordinarily valuable this exercise turned out to be for her. So she was an inspirational speaker, and she had a handful of very profitable corporate clients, but that was really her only revenue stream. And all of her clients were being fed to her by this large corporation. And it was reliable and sustainable, but she also felt stifled because she had to operate in compliance with all their policies and limitations. She felt like she had to play by their rules and she couldn't be creative and she couldn't even choose who she wanted to work with. And she wanted to strike out on her own and start building her private practice. And when we were doing an analysis of her biggest competitors, this guy was also an inspirational speaker with the same education and similar methodologies. And he was in business for about the same amount of time as her and had a lot of the same connections as her even. So we are trying to figure out, like what's the difference? Why was he so successful and she's still kind of struggling? So we looked at his website together and it wasn't remarkable. It wasn't, anything particularly unique or impactful. His video was flashy, but not moving. And yet he scaled his business. He had written a few books that sold well. He's done a lot of big speaking engagements and he's got a YouTube channel. And because of all of those strategies, he has marketing muscles. He built videos and books and speeches, and he built content. And he worked really hard to get himself in front of people. And then we looked at her website, which she had recently updated with new gorgeous photography and improved organization and powerful copywriting. And it was really impressive. So I asked her, what's missing? What does this guy have that you don't have? And the first thing she said was, well, I don't have his fancy videos, and I don't have a book, and I don't have a YouTube channel, and I don't have all of his contacts. And then I asked her, well, could you start a YouTube channel? And could you start building some videos about your business? And she said, yeah. And I said, if you set aside the time and worked with an editor, could you write a book? And she said, yeah. And I asked her, so why haven't you? What's the difference between you and this guy? Why does he get to do all this big, bold stuff? And why has he become so successful? What does he have that you don't? And she kind of like looked down at her hands and she said, he's unjustifiably confident and he just puts himself out there and hustles. And I could hear how angry she was when she said that. So I asked her, is he more talented than you? Is he a better speaker? And she quickly said, no, definitely no. And then I asked her, is he smarter? And she said, oh, no, no, no. Like, I can't actually believe how successful he is. So I said, okay, then what does he have that you don't? And she said, I don't know, he's just confident. He just gives himself permission. And I said, okay, that's it. That's your answer. That's the difference. He gives himself permission. And that's what you need to train yourself to do. And that's what we're going to work on. So if you're just as smart as this guy and just as talented and you have a slamming website and an incredible service, then literally the only things getting in your way is your fear of failure and perfectionism and the fact that you're waiting for someone to give you permission. You're waiting for someone to tell you that you're ready. And here's a harsh reality check. No one can give that to you. That comes from you. And if you don't give yourself permission to take yourself seriously and put yourself out there and say, fuck it, I'm going to do this. If you never let yourself try, you will continue to be held down by your own ceiling. But we're going to address that. So as of today, we're going to practice re-scripting the way that you talk to yourself. And this is how this works. You're going to hear your unconscious insecurities say something like, well, I'll never be as successful as, or I'm not really smart enough to, or I'll never be. And when you hear yourself say self-deprecating thoughts like that, I just want you to pause and recognize that for what it is. It's just a negative thought that came from your past, and you don't have time for that anymore. It's no longer protecting you, it's now limiting you. So when you hear it, and we all do, we all have this, I just want you to practice catching yourself thinking it. Like, oh, there's that insecurity, and then label it as negative self-language and push it aside. And it does take practice, but with repetition, it will change how you think about yourself, because that's how humans learn. We learn through repetition. So the more you say something to yourself, the more you believe it. So let's replace some of the negative thoughts with positive ones so you can move on. So as you're doing these competitive analyses and you're looking at other successful businesses and you're gathering inspiration, if you hear that voice in the back of your head say something negative like, this site is awesome, but I could never build anything like this, or I could never afford that photography, or I'll never actually be that big, I invite you to investigate those thoughts and question their validity. Is that actually true? And if you just gave yourself permission to be your own authority and show up every day and try and be ready to learn and fuck up and make mistakes, but just keep moving forward, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get there. You just need to not give up.